Welcome to K-Pastors Roundtable. I'm your host, Alex. Today, I have Steve Chang, Senior Pastor, Living Hope Community Church. Hello, Pastor. How are you?
Hi, Alex. Thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you for coming in. Today, I wanted to kind of get your background and how you began as a pastor. So, did you immigrate from Korea?
Yes, I was born in Korea. 1971, that was when we had very little Koreans here. And so I was one of the early immigrants here. Grew up in America, in Southern California, went to eventually UCLA, studied computer engineering. But as I was growing up, I was in a small Korean church, like a lot of us.
Yes.
Wilshire Korean Presbyterian Church.
Oh, okay.
정시우 목사님.
Okay.
And that was my community.
Yes.
I grew up in the church, and that was what I knew. And as I was growing up, I loved the Korean church. But at the same time, I remember when I went off to UCLA, got into a fraternity. It was a Christian fraternity.
Yes.
Met a lot of non-Korean Christians. Loved it, grew a lot. But toward my junior year, I wanted to start a Bible study for Korean Americans or English-speaking Korean Americans.
Okay.
So we put ads out, flyers out at UCLA. Are you an English-speaking Korean American? And we gathered a bunch of Korean Americans, started a Bible study, and it was called KACF, later became CCM, which still exists today. But going back, it was when I was growing up in the Korean church, when I was in 6th grade. An older brother from the church, it was the pastor's son actually, Chang, asked me if I was a Christian. And I said, well, I don't know what it means. So he explained to me the gospel. And it was on the steps of that little church in Wilshire Korean Presbyterian Church that I accepted Jesus Christ. And I've been part of the church growing, trying my best, the best that I can. So that was my background. Eventually became a computer engineer, loved my engineering time, but eventually felt called to ministry, went off to Dallas Theological Seminary, went and did an internship in Korea, came back, finished out my seminary, and came and started the church. I think I probably gave too much information.
So when did you actually have a calling to become a pastor?
You know, when I was still at UCLA, I was weighing my two possible callings. One of my callings or my ambition at the time was to become the first Korean vice president of IBM.
Okay.
I studied computer engineering when there was very few people in the computer industry.
Yes.
But I thought that in order to really do something, you have to go into management. So I thought of getting my MBA and climbing the corporate ladder. And back then, IBM was like the Apple of today.
Yes,
that's what I wanted to do. On the other hand, I was looking at the work that I was doing in ministry, whether teaching youth students at church or my involvement with CCM. And I used to compare, what is it that I want to be doing for the rest of my life? And the more I thought about it, I thought, you know, I don't know. I really want to do ministry. There was that fateful day when I interviewed with IBM, IBM North Carolina, and they looked at my resume, which on the bottom said my future aspiration is either to get an MBA or to get an MDiv, THM. And they said, what is this? And I said, well, I'm thinking about going into ministry. And they said, well, we really want lifers at IBM. So I didn't get my IBM job.
Okay.
But I did go into aerospace engineering, did well, loved it. But 2 years into it, I was driving on the 405 freeway coming back from work, and I was listening to a message by John MacArthur on what it means to be called. Okay. He was talking from 1 Timothy chapter 3, he who desires the office of overseer.
Yes.
And that desire is a way that God sometimes calls people. And so I took that as a part of my calling.
Okay.
Decided to essentially quit engineering and go off to Dallas. So that was kind of my calling.
I'm curious, financially, I mean, you're going from a job to trying to study. Was it okay? I mean, did you get married or?
No, I was still single, but God was gracious to me. Within the 2 years I was working as an engineer, I was able to pay off all my school loans, the little that I had. I was able to save up quite a bit of money and go off to seminary. I eventually got a nice scholarship and started working as like a computer programmer after the first semester. So financially, I got provided all that I really needed.
So after you got the MDiv, did you come back to LA area or where did you go after that?
Well, Dallas Seminary doesn't actually have an MDiv. They have a 4-year THM.
Oh, okay, THM.
But what I did was I was thinking about what I felt God had called me to, which was the second-generation Korean Americans.
Yes.
And I looked at my own preparation, and I realized that, you know, although I was getting prepared in terms of the Bible, in terms of ministry, and things of that nature, The areas in which I felt kind of lacking in was an understanding of the Korean church,
Yes.
the Korean language, and the
Mhm.
Korean culture.
Okay.
And I thought the best way to do that is to actually go to Korea and do an internship. So after 3 years of seminary, I went to Korea to do an internship at a church called 남서울교회. 홍정길 목사님.
Okay.
I don't know if you know him.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
My father knows him, so.
Oh, really? He was a wonderful pastor and
Okay.
mentor. I spent a year there. I learned so much, was blessed by my time. Toward the end of my year, they asked me, Pastor Hong asked me if I wanted to go preach down at a church in Daedok, which was like the Boston or
Right.
and the
Keist area.
yeah, Keist. Well,
Yeah.
actually, the church met at Keist.
Okay.
I didn't really know anything. I thought I was going to a Shigor church.
Okay.
They sent me down. I took the bus, and they met me. And I found out that it was a church filled with professors and scientists and grad students, really smart people.
Yes.
I preached there a few weeks, and they asked me if I would consider being their interim pastorate. And I was surprised because my Korean was very limited, and I wasn't ordained. I didn't have my seminary education completed yet.
Yes.
But I eventually agreed to, and so I was their interim pastor for a year. Grew a lot. They were so gracious to me. And then came back to seminary to finish out my THM.
Okay.
And then I came and started the church.
Oh, from the beginning, you had a heart for the second generation Koreans, but to start a church, isn't that a really tough, risky, many aspects in terms of trying to start? Where did you start?
Well, my heart has always been with the Korean church, to
Yes.
be alongside the Korean church, actually. And so when I was graduating seminary, I interviewed at several places. And just because I spoke English, back then not
Too
a lot
many
of people,
Koreans
right.
did that, yeah.
But eventually, I was talking to a 선배 of mine, an older pastor friend, Timothy Song, who had just started a church called Good Stewards Church, 선한 청지기 교회.
Right.
And I was talking to him, just trying to get some counsel. And he said, why don't you just come to Good Stewards Church and start a ministry here? Without ever having visited, without knowing really anything, but just knowing him.
Okay.
For me, the way that I feel is whether I grow the ministry or not, that's up to me.
Mm-hmm.
But I wanted to work alongside of someone that I can respect spiritually and in character. And I had that for Pastor Song. So I came some 26 years ago, and when I came, I realized, wow, they really didn't have anything, because it was a church plant.
Right.
And once I came, Good Source Church decided to make us a mission church where they would sponsor us financially for 3 years.
Okay.
We would be at the same elementary school, though, and so we started that way. So it was a church plant, didn't get a lot of financial support, but just enough.
Uh-huh.
And then it was up to me and the planting team, which I had formed once I got here,
Okay.
to plant the church. We didn't grow like really fast, but it was like a turtle.
Okay. Well, as long as you grow, it's okay, whether it's turtle or not.
Yeah.
So how many members did you begin with when you planted church?
Well, the first meeting was my wife and me and 2 people and my toddler daughter, so
Okay.
five of us. And we met that way for about 3 months.
Okay.
And when we launched the service on October 24th, 1993, we probably had about 15 people.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And then what size is today? I know you're, as far as I know, you're the oldest second generation Korean church. So
Our average attendance overall with the adults and children, about 820 or so.
wow.
But and God's been gracious to us.
Right. Well, I mean, as I always say, the number is not really that important. It's how you minister to them and they, help them with their faith. So that's great. Now, I looked at your website and there's some things that kind of jumped out at me. And usually mission statement is a little bit different than what I read in your church. It's challenging a new generation to become committed followers of Jesus Christ. Is that mission statement, did you come up with that?
Yes. If you scour our website, we have 2 statements that we use. One in our vision statement, which is a church to call home,
Okay.
and our mission statement, challenging a new generation to become committed followers of Jesus Christ.
Right.
Challenging a new generation to become committed followers of Jesus Christ. I feel like if I can parse it down, all that the church can do is challenge people,
Right.
and it's up to the individual to respond.
Right.
We exist for the new generation, always thinking of the next generation. When Good Source Church helped us to plant, they were thinking, what can we do for the second generation?
Okay.
When I became a father and my children became teenagers, a new generation meant something different to me.
Oh, okay.
And so, whereas when we first started, having praise using a guitar may have felt like, hey, that's what's necessary for the new generation.
Right.
But as I became older and as I saw my daughters grow older, a new generation meant something even different.
Okay.
And so the thought was, we built up a good church for us,
Yeah.
for the baby boomer, which I am a part of.
Right.
But what about the Gen Zs or the millennials? Is this the kind of church that they would want to come to and be at home, bring their friends and such?
Yes.
And that switched our thinking too. And so challenging a new generation to become committed followers of Jesus Christ. Not committed followers of Living Hope, not loyal to a certain brand, but to Jesus Christ. So that's our statement. The other statement that we use is a church to call home. And I think that reflects the kind of culture that we have at Living Hope.
Okay.
And what we mean by that is, home is a place where you go to even when no one else takes you.
Right. Right.
And you're married, right?
Right.
Alex? Yeah, your wife has to let you in.
I hope so.
And you let your kids in,
Right.
Good or bad.
Yes.
We're just family that
Yes.
way. It's your home is a place where your kids can go off to grad school.
Mhm.
Years later when they come, this is still home for them.
Right.
A church to call home, and this is so important. I think for a lot of minorities in this country,
Yes.
they feel marginalized. They
Yes.
feel like they
Yes.
don't really belong.
Yes.
Why is it that English-speaking Asian Americans, though at their work they feel perfectly competent,
Yes.
that they still have a hunger, a longing for this third place where they can call home?
Yes.
And I think that a lot of Korean Americans or Asian Americans or other minorities, in fact, long for a place where they can come and just be accepted for who they are.
Yes.
And I believe that the church can be that place, especially for the third culture people.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and for us, just being around for 26 years, we have people who were there from the beginning.
Wow.
And are still here, people who went off to grad school, like I said, came back, people who get married and their children grow up, and this is their church to call home. And so we're grateful for that.
A sense of belonging. That was one of the things I was very envious of one of my friends who took me to his church. He's where his grandparents went, his parents went,
Yeah.
now he's going to. And there was a wooden pews. It's a small church, maybe 150 people can fit in. And all the pews has a little bit of roundness on the seat.
Right.
As I'm walking, trying to look for where to sit down, and he pointed out one of them, says, "This is where my grandfather sits," and this that round, And I said, "How long has he used this pew?" And he says, "At least 30 years."
Amazing.
And so when I heard that, I felt really envious of him that he belonged to somewhere that he says, "This is my church."
Right.
As a Korean, I don't know if you find this true or not, but if you don't go to the same church anymore, you're like outcast to them. You don't belong to them anymore, So it's really hard to go back and visit them even because there's certain feeling of uneasiness when you go back. And so I'm so glad that you're using the words the home church in the sense of belonging there, whether you went off to school or whether you went off to job or to another state to live. When you come back, you can feel that. That's so important, I think.
Yeah, really feeling at home is not always a location, a physical
Right,
space. It's
right.
relationships, right?
Right.
So you can feel at home with a group of people, whether you're at a physical location or you're off somewhere else.
Yes.
And if you can develop a sense of community, a loyalty, and acceptance, and I think you can develop that culture. So we're grateful for that.
I'm right now speaking with Steve Chang, Senior Pastor of Living Hope Community Church. Also, another thing I found on your website talks about values.
Yes.
And there's 6 of them, worship, receive, connect, impact, go, raise. I thought it was ingenious in a way because this simplifies things. When you visit like church websites, sometimes it's so theological or stuff like that. And so when you're reading through it, it doesn't really touch you, as you read it. But as I read your website, I'm going, Yeah, that's what I need. That's what I can relate. That's correct. And so, is this something approach that you took for the second and third gen you're talking about to reach to them through the website or?
Well, I'll be honest with you,
Mm-hmm.
Alex. One of the things that I tell my staff and others is when you're thinking about visiting a church, you can pretty much ignore what they have on their website.
Okay.
And the reason being, not that it's unimportant, but I've found that there's oftentimes a disconnect between what they write on their website
Yes.
and who they are.
Yes.
Just because we have that on our website doesn't necessarily mean it's all true.
Mm-hmm.
And just because if another church just copies it, it
Right.
doesn't mean that they've automatically adopted that culture.
Right.
A church to call home, I believe, does reflect our culture.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of those statements, and we're constantly trying to adjust our public statements to match who we actually are.
Okay.
For example, the last statement that you read is raise a godly family, right?
Yes.
And I believe one of the values that Living Hope has, and values are supposed to be like personalities of a church. Different churches can have different personalities. They're not necessarily right and wrong.
Right.
It's not like statements of faith per se. But like that last one, raise a godly family, I believe that is reflective of who we are.
Mm-hmm.
And that we love children. All churches say they love children. I don't know of a church that has on their website, we dislike, but we love children. And I think it bleeds out in so many different arenas of how we do church. And so if you are a young family living in North Orange County and you're thinking of finding a church that you can call home, not only for the parents, but for a preschooler or a third grader or a junior high kid, where they can go and say, this is my church.
Okay.
And we, alongside of one another, whether there are times when we do praise together, listen to messages together, do VBS together, there's a sense in which we value kids. We believe that one of the greatest unreached people group
Right.
that any church will ever encounter
Mm-hmm.
is in their Sunday school program, in their children's ministry.
Okay.
And we want them to not only hear the gospel, but experience the gospel. So I believe raise a godly family is a value that we really do believe in. And so, yeah, and we believe in all the others also, but yeah, I think we try to reflect who we are.
Mm-hmm. Going back, how much as a church do you get involved in the family's life? There's two schools of thought that I've come across. One side is you teach them and then you stay out of their life and let them do whatever they need to do. But then the other side of it is you get involved in their daily life so that if they struggle, you jump in there with them and you help them get out of struggling. So which is the approach that you take as a church or as a pastor?
I think that when a church is smaller,
Mm-hmm.
that you do have to get more involved.
Right.
Because the small group that you have is the whole church, and when you do life together, and you can't help but to get involved.
Right.
Now, there's a difference in philosophy of how directive you can get. So can a pastor, for example, tell someone, you need to marry this person as opposed to that other person?
Okay.
You can't drive that car, or you need to go to this workplace as opposed to this other job. Yeah, there's a line of thought in which some people believe that is something that the church can do. I don't necessarily think that's something that we believe in per se, but when our church was smaller, we were a lot more involved in the lives of people. But now that we're a slightly bigger church, it's very difficult for me to be as involved.
Right.
Or where that happens, though, is in the small group level,
Okay.
the cell
groups.
level, right? And we hope that at the cell group level, the families or the individuals are involved in each other's lives to some extent. And so if there's marital problems, that's the first line of defense, that the other couples within that cell group would be there for each other. And if they need to kick it up, then they would bring it to me.
Oh, okay.
And then I would sometimes personally get involved, or I would bring a therapist in or something to that nature. Yeah.
So how do you ensure that nobody falls through the cracks in terms of, as you mentioned, the smaller churches, let's say you have 120 members, it's a lot easier to get involved in their lives. But when you get up to 5, 6, 700, it's very difficult just, get involved in their life. And so how do you, as a pastor, make sure that nobody gets, falls in the crack of not being belonging or not being able to address their concern to somebody that can help them?
And I think that's an excellent question.
Mm-hmm.
I think that when a church is smaller, most pastors tend to intuitively care for, pray for, shepherd their people. Now,
Yes.
there's some pastors who feel like shepherding is not their gift. They just want to preach.
Right.
And I think they act like a big church pastor, although their church is small. And I
Yes,
think that's a
yes.
mistake.
Yeah.
I think there are other pastors who have a bigger church and they still act like small church pastors, and that's a mistake because they can burn themselves out.
Right.
What the bigger church pastor needs to do is become an organizational leader where the systems are done well and the cell groups are done well. And I believe the term cell group was really more popularized by one of not the biggest church in the world, Sunbogum. Right.
Yes. Right.
And really, we can think what we want about their theology, but their organization was amazing.
Right.
And so a church like us, that's what we need to do better at. If someone were to say, you know what, do we lose people through the cracks, or are there times when people never get connected to a cell group, or they didn't get along with some of the members, and so they got their feelings hurt and they left? Of course, those things happen, but it is in the organizational level where we try to take people through a process in which they are connected to a small group and they're committed to a small group. We take attendance at small group and things of that nature, and hopefully the caring happens at that level.
In your organization, do you feel like that you ask for responsibility when some programs start, or let's say cell group? Accountability is maybe a better word for it. If something happens, that somebody should be able to address that concern or that problem at hand in terms of membership that complains about things, or
Yeah, the feedback loop that
Right.
maybe you're thinking about, the first arena, the first circle that they should be a part of is their small group.
right,
And so they should be talking to the other members or shepherds saying, hey, this is my need. Can you help me here?
right,
If what we expect of a member of our church is that they are part of a small group and they are part of also a service group, a ministry of
Okay.
some sort. And those are the two circles that they should be swimming in.
Okay.
So they should be having community, and they should be exercising their gifts in two different circles. Sometimes they're one, but two different circles for a lot of different people. And so there's a feedback loop there. Now, what about people who don't get involved in either?
right.
And yeah, that's the difficult part. If people choose not to get involved, there's sometimes only so much you can do, unless there are churches that are a lot more directive,
Yes.
who would cut them out of membership. I don't know if that's who we are per se.
Right.
But the good news is that vast majority of our people are actually involved in small group as well as service. So we're grateful for that.
You say you love young children. What kind of programs do you have for the young children at your church?
We have an extremely vibrant children's ministry.
Okay.
We're grateful. We have our children's ministry from 0 to 5th grade can be divided into two big parts.
Okay.
Kingdom Kids Junior, which is 0 through pre-kindergarten or like preschool.
Mm-hmm.
And then Kingdom Kids Club, which is kindergarten through 5th grade. And for example, if you, Alex, become a grandfather,
Yes.
and your grandchild who's a preschooler comes to Living Hope,
Yes.
they will come to this program, and one of the first things that they do is, well, you check them in and the whole bit, but they have a service for 2-year-old to 5-year-olds.
Wow, really?
Right. They start in one room. There are lots of teachers there,
Mhm.
2 to 5-year-olds. And they have a puppet show, praise, and the whole bit. And then once the service is done, and a message, once the service is done, they go to their appropriate age classroom. So the 2-year-olds go to a classroom.
Mhm.
The 3-year-olds go to a classroom. 4 to 5-year-olds go to a classroom. We have 2 paid part-time directors
Okay.
for Kingdom Kids Junior. For elementary, for K through 5th, they all go to a room to worship first with praise and message. The kindergartners go have an independent program during their teaching time.
Okay.
The fifth graders go and have a program of their own, while the first through fourth graders have classroom programs that are more consistent with what everyone else is doing. And we have 2 paid part-time directors for that program. I think one of the better things that we do as a church is Vacation Bible School.
Okay.
We just finished both of them. We have one for preschoolers and we have one for the elementary kids. This year, we had 95 kids in our VBS Junior, the preschool one.
Right.
We had 291 kids, or almost 300 kids for our VBS for the elementary age kid.
Wow.
We had a lot of volunteers. A lot of kids made decisions to accept Jesus Christ.
Okay.
It was tremendous.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So it sounds like you have a really wonderful program. Now, teachers, you have directors and then you have teachers. And are the teachers trained, or do they go through courses to become a teacher especially for like elementary kids? The younger kids, I'm not sure if you can actually do a lot of training for to become teacher of 2-year-old, but for maybe 7, 8, 9, 10 years, that's the age they form a lot of ideas and things like that. And so how do you train the teachers, or how do you pick the teachers to teach them?
This should be actually answered by our children's director and not by me, 'cause
Okay.
she knows better. But I believe what they do is for each of the subcategories, so like kindergarten and then first, second grade, third, fourth grade, things of that nature, they have coaches.
Okay.
Oftentimes they're experienced older school teachers
Okay.
who oversee a group of teachers.
Okay.
And so I know, for example, one of our male teachers, he teaches at a junior high or an elementary level. He knows the Bible a lot.
Mm-hmm.
He used to coach a group of Sunday school teachers.
Okay.
And so he would oftentimes help prepare the material and things of that nature and coach the kids. And he would sometimes visit the classrooms and things of that nature.
Okay.
So there's a little bit of coaching there.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Pastor Steve. Looks like we're coming to the end. Thank you for being with us today, Pastor.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Alex.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
K-Pastors Roundtable is a discussion program for today's English-speaking Koreans and Christians. We will discuss the current issues and important issues dealing with our community. Your participation is very important to us. You can send in your questions or comments via email kprt316@gmail.com. You can hear our program on AM 1190 in Southern California on Saturday and Sunday at 1:30 p.m. You can also find us on YouTube channel K-Pastors Round Table. Please join us. Thank you.